There's an old saying, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. And there seem to be a lot of angry people out there at the moment, all raging against each other from opposite ends of the spectrum. We've seen unrest on the streets. There was the storming of the Capitol building in Washington in January this year. We've seen the Black Lives Matter movement taking to the streets. These are all people who are fighting for something, whether it is something that you agree with or not. Generally, as Martin Luther King said, riot is the voice of the unheard. There seem to be an awful lot of people who feel unheard out there at the moment. And whether you agree with their particular values, their particular standpoint or not, is anger the best way to meet them? Is rage the best way to bring about change? Is civil disobedience the best way to change the world for the better? Obviously, throughout history, it is those people who've taken a stand who've brought about change. Look at the suffragettes, look at the civil rights movement. Look at all those people who've taken to the streets because they have been underrepresented, unseen and unheard. But what is the best way to bring this change about, to nurture this conversation? Is it about raging? I mean, go online today, go onto social media, and it's just people raging against each other. But very few people seem to be listening. Are we so stuck in what we believe to be right that we are unable to even assess different viewpoints, unable to assess the fact that we might actually be wrong? This is a kind of continuation of my last podcast where I spoke to Trudy Goodman about whether or not turning inwards to find our own light, to find our own peace, is actually turning our back on the world. Do we need to be out there confronting the world? Or do we need to be in here confronting ourselves and becoming the change we want to see in the world? There are so many different perspectives on this and so many different ways of tackling it. But if we want to be heard, do we need to listen to others? This is a conversation that I picked up with Chris Manning. He's otherwise known as Mindfulness Man, and he's the founder of the Mindfulness in Daily Life Facebook group, which is now going on 100,000 members. We spoke about different methods of bringing about change, of changing people's viewpoint to align with our own, whether or not that is the right course of action. Where does this fit within this kind of umbrella of spiritual mindfulness, of loving kindness? Do we just allow people to continue where they're going? Do we try and change people? Are we even wrong to assume that our viewpoint is the right viewpoint? It's a challenging conversation, and I hope that you get some pause for thought from it. And if you want to find out more or join the wonderful community at Mindfulness in Daily Life, go on to Facebook. It's facebook.com/groups/mindfulness in daily life. And if you enjoy this podcast, enjoy this episode with my conversation with Chris, then please subscribe, rate and review. And we've got some very exciting and interesting guests coming up as well in the future. In the meantime, enjoy this conversation, and I will catch you at the end for a final word. So Chris, thank you for coming on to my podcast a second time. Last time we kind of touched on mindfulness and right mindfulness. You know, some people get kind of sucked into this habit of meditation and become so disconnected, and you talked about this as well, so disconnected from their kind of real world responsibilities that they just want to stay in this place of meditation all the time, and that can be actually quite a dangerous thing sometimes. But I wanted to talk again about some of the things we've been chatting about offline or away from the podcast, particularly in the context of where we're going at the moment in the world, because right now people can't go out. So there's a saying, and I can't remember if it was someone on your Facebook group or if I came up with it. I'm hoping I came up with it, because it's really good. But it's basically, if you can't go out, go in.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I've heard it a few times now, and you know, people are picking up like books about mindfulness. Pema Chodron seems to be popping up all over the place at the moment. I'm either tuned into that. I sort of just seem to be seeing it everywhere I turn at the moment. That wintering book that was on the Mindfulness in Daily Life reading group is popping up everywhere. Everyone is going in because there's nowhere else to go right now, and I suppose that's a good thing. But where are we going when we go in? So when we do these things, this meditation or this mindfulness, what are we hoping to achieve? What's the point of it all?
Well, we normally start from suffering. We normally start by realizing that our happiness isn't out there, and we keep chasing it and finding time after time nothing but disappointment. So we've been, you could say, forced to face ourselves. Our doors have been locked.
Yeah.
We've been in some kind of solitary confinement, and we've had to dive in. We haven't had the choice. And like you said about my group, I've been trying to teach for, I don't know, maybe 12 years now, and nobody was listening. Nobody was interested. All of a sudden, everybody wants to learn how to meditate. And it's funny, I was speaking to my teacher today in one of his lessons, and he said, he's a Buddhist monk, and he said, everybody's talking about how difficult it is. And he said, there's no change whatsoever for me. I don't see people anyway. I'm just in on my own all the time. I live alone. And he was talking about it's not suffering for him, because he's learned that secret that inside of us, deep inside, is our freedom.
Do you think there's this kind of sense that this whole time, time that we've been busy out there in the world chasing whatever it is that we're supposedly chasing, we've never actually had to face ourselves, and that suddenly we're kind of alone with ourselves and with our nearest and dearest, obviously, but also with ourselves, and possibly we're not liking what we're seeing and who we are and who we've become.
It's all a distraction, isn't it? Every time we go to the fridge, every time we go online, every time we wait for that little brown package to come knocking on the door, it's all a distraction from ourselves. And we're finding that out the hard way now, because there's very little to distract ourselves with. And that's why people are going crazy. People are really losing the plot. And it's very sad. But I'm hoping that from this, a new movement is going to occur where people do stop, people do make time for introspection, people do value every part of the journey. My daughters are suffering greatly. It's terrible for them because they're 14 and 16 years old. They're at a time when being with their peers is the most important thing. They're over family, and they'll probably be over us for a while. But they need their peers. And I said to my daughter the other day, I said, we've got to try and find a blessing in this. What's being built in you now as a 14-year-old in all of this is such resilience. If you can learn to find it, and one day you'll look back and you'll say, I survived that, I can survive anything.
Yeah, there is that thing, isn't there, that it's a meme. I think it goes around from time to time. No matter how hard you feel it is, you've survived 100% of your hard days so far, and so you
Yeah.
can survive pretty much whatever is thrown at you. But there's also this sense that, like, everyone talks about the new normal, and I've said this like loads of times on various conversations on my podcast, but our whole idea of what is normal is completely man-made. We have these kind of crutches, these frameworks that we fall into, education, traditions and conventions, and Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. This is what your life is supposed to look like, and it's all man-made and artificial. And what we've seen due to the pandemic is that starts to fall apart, and we don't have those crutches anymore. So it's up to us to decide what our life looks like. And so we're suddenly faced with deciding, okay, what is reality? How do we define it? How do we choose to see it? There are certain things that are kind of irrefutable. I've got to pay the bills, and I've got to, keep a roof over my head. But actually, everything else is pretty fluid. And this whole notion of like this material world that we've come to live in is actually pretty flimsy, isn't it? And do you think there's a sense that people have lost a sense of meaning because that's not there anymore?
Yeah. I think if you look at like the death, you could definitely say the death of religion um, in the West. Maybe not so much in America, but we've lost something in that. We've lost those times of contemplation when we connected with who we really were, who we really are, sorry. And all we've been doing is covering it up with stuff, with dust. And this is a great opportunity to find ourselves again, to find out what our values really are and how to connect and how to love each other as well. We've been so unkind to one another. I think a period of not being together, a long period of not being together, is probably going to be a good thing in the long run. Maybe we'll appreciate one another more.
Do you think that kindness isn't going to be a natural outcome, or do you think it's something that people are going to have to force themselves to look at? Because there is a part of me that thinks people default to the more cynical, to the kind of towards the anger and the hatred. And so the love needs a little bit of a shove, a little bit of a push in the right direction. We need to work at it rather than letting all the negativity kind of boil up.
Yeah, we do. And something you hear about a lot right now is self-love. There's so many books coming out, there's podcasts, I'm waiting for the self-love magazine. I think that's going to be the next thing. It's huge. And that's where loving others, I believe, starts. If we don't grasp it incorrectly and turn it into narcissism,
Yeah.
if we see it as a practice, because when you think of it, the people you have difficulties with are the people that are having difficulties with themselves. If they're happy and sorted, they don't put that negative hatred out into the world. It's the fearful and the self-loathing that are putting that out into the world. People that love themselves, they want others to feel that too.
But do you think that those people who potentially are, I don't want to say broken, but those people who are, um, hurting and causing pain for other people, do you think they know that they're hurt, that they're damaged?
Not necessarily, no.
Yeah.
Someone immediately springs to mind for me.
Yeah.
And often these people, they project a lot, don't they?
Yeah.
So they see it as you're flawed. How do we get past that? Well, I believe recently in the last year, there's lots of terms that are now in common language that I'd never heard of before, gaslighting being one.
Yeah.
We have in the past allowed people to manipulate our truth, and we've been fine with it. We've not said anything. We've been like, I know they're lying. I
Yeah.
know for a fact they're lying. But you can't say to someone, it's not polite to say you're not telling the truth. We almost wash it over, cover it over. But I think the whole authenticity movement is gaining speed and gathering energy. And we will get to a point where we say, I'm being gaslighted here.
Yeah.
You're playing with my truth. I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, it's funny. It's like I keep coming back to this thing that we spoke about at the beginning, and it's like that old phrase, a lot of man's problems are they stem from being unable to sit quietly in a room
Yeah.
by himself, and it's that I look at this kind of the anti-woke movement. So all
Yeah.
these people are trying to cling on to, they say, oh, this is political correctness gone mad, or this is just wokeism gone mad. And I'm here thinking, I think being woke is actually a pretty cool thing. And, being liberal is a pretty cool thing and progressive. Whereas there seems to be an unwillingness to face the shame of who we used to be. We used to be, and we still are in many cases, there are still many things about the way we live which are immoral and wrong, the way we intensive farming, for example,
Yeah.
and the way we kind of work internationally, capitalism, and globalization. There are certain elements of exploitation in that kind of chain of um, of kind of supply of goods and that kind of stuff. But it's just this whole kind of being able to look at ourselves and become aware of ourselves, and all of this anti-wokeism is almost feels like a backlash against that. It's like, no, I won't feel ashamed for the acts of my ancestors. No, I won't feel ashamed. And that is almost an excuse not to try better, not to try to be better, not to try harder. And I think as long as we're coming up against that, it's like, well, how dare you say that I'm not a decent person just because, I don't believe in the Black Lives Matter movement, or I don't believe in, this ridiculous wokeism or whatever it is. How dare you say that? And there needs to be this kind of non-judgmental self-awareness where we actually say, hang on a minute, these beliefs are wrong, and that's the hard thing, getting people to face that, people to face themselves and where they come from, and say, actually, no, I'm not comfortable with what I was yesterday, so I want to be better tomorrow.
Well, I think the whole woke thing, like anything, goes too far. And what ends up happening, if you're screaming into someone's face that they are wrong, they're
Yeah,
not going to listen. They're instantly shutting down. It doesn't work. We need new ways of we need empathic nonviolent communication to start flourishing. And we need not to be like, there's this whole thing of, people might really dislike what I'm about to say, but this thing of like, if you vote for this, or if you're a racist,
yeah,
I'm not your friend, I'm not. But don't we need to befriend people who are stuck in cycles of hatred? And we need to listen. I believe we actually, again, this is probably not popular. I believe we need to listen to people. I'll give you an example. The working classes. I'm from a working class background, and I've had conversations with my cousin, and he knows I'm into this whole sort of political correct thing, and he's totally not. But I love him dearly, and he said to me, "It's all right for you living down there. You're not living amongst it." And I don't know. I think we need to. I think we need to listen. We need to listen to one another. And if we don't listen, if we just shut people down with name calling, and nothing's ever going to get achieved. I fully believe in empathic listening, in listening, and then we put, and if someone feels listened to, if they feel you've fully taken that in, then they're waiting and they will take in what you say. So that's your best chance. That's your best chance of making a better society, to fully listen without judgment. In therapy, it's called unconditional good regard, something like that, where the person in front of you, no matter what they've done, no matter how abhorrent their views, you you're reflecting kindness to them, you're listening, and you, you you're not judging them for their views. You're trying to understand where they come from, and then you then have this opportunity that you don't have if you scream in their face and label them and demonize them, if that makes sense.
I understand that. I mean, I guess that the problem I have at the moment is that there are elements, forces in society who benefit from manipulating this need to be heard, and
Yes.
this, that I've got an itch. I'm unhappy about something,
Mm.
and here is a newspaper that is particularly aligned with my particular discomfort, and
Mm.
they have presented to me someone to be angry at about it. And meanwhile, we've got good meaning kind of mindfulness people over here willing to listen to me, but actually I've got someone here stoking my flames, getting me riled up. Who's going to win this? Who's going to win this kind of battle of wills? Is it the people with the big money who benefit and profit from this anger and this outrage, or is it going to be the people with the goodwill and the is it? And this is a conversation I had, I suppose, a bit with Trudy Goodman in my last podcast. Is it enough to have good intentions and to be willing to listen to people? Is that going to be enough to change the world? Is it enough to live a good life and to be as honest and as decent and as aware as you can be? Is that enough to
It's
change the
a
world?
tough one, isn't it? It's a real difficult question, um, because whatever you say, you can be miles off. Do you grab a banner and go out into the street and say, I no longer accept this? Or do you show by example how life can be, how peace, you see, in a way, I'm doing my own kind of activism now. I'm teaching meditation online. I'm teaching people to come into themselves where they're going to learn all of this. If I were to turn now, we block any people with who are abusive
Yeah.
on our group. We block them. But I like to give people a chance, because if you block these people, they've got no hope. I like to keep these difficult people with their views on the group, because I know eventually it's going to get in. They're going to become more self-aware, and they're going to be surrounded by good people, by people who are on the right track, and those views will help them to change.
I mean, this is long-term stuff, isn't it? I had a conversation with a Buddhist monk a few years ago, right at the beginning of the podcast, a chap called Chan Fat Vu.
Mm.
And, I said, the problem with the outrage right now and an election every 4 years and things like Brexit is it's stuff that we can see happening before our very eyes.
Yeah.
Whereas this kind of good intentioned, teaching of mindfulness, of a kind of self-awareness and peace and this kind of thing, it's a slow burner. And it could take
It
it could take
is.
100 years, it could take
Yeah.
200 years, it
Yeah.
might never happen. And he
Yeah.
said, well, but you just have to keep going. It's like the river that wears down the rock that wears the Grand Canyon down. You just have to keep going, and even if it never gets there, you have to keep going. And there's a kind of, I don't know, is that a bit defeatist to kind of just say, should we not be out? Because I don't believe in protest. I don't think protest does anything, especially the way we do it in Britain. You apply for a permit, here are the rules for your protest. You can only do it on this day, and this is where you can go and do it. And that is how protests work in the UK. And I don't believe that works. I've done Greenpeace marches that have all been, peaceful, and we've followed the rules. And that's not protest to me. I think protest should be about going out and smashing the system and breaking the windows, like we saw the students doing, like we saw happening with the Black Lives Matter protests. I think that is protest. And that shows immediate action. You see the results straight away, that people are angry
Mm.
and change happens. People are getting there is a movement happening before your very eyes.
Yeah.
Sometimes with the mindfulness thing, it sometimes feels like a lot of people choosing to disconnect and disengage, and that almost feels like it's not doing anything. Do you know what I
There's
mean?
actually a movement called engaged Buddhism, where you are more active in the world. It's, I guess it's down to your personality. Um, it's just not me.
Yeah.
You
No, me
know,
neither. Me neither.
I care. I care greatly, but I don't believe in rallying war cries. All I see that happens, if you look in America at what's happened recently, I think the explosion of the right wing and the explosion of the left wing happened together. It's, and I firmly believe in a middle way. Obviously, my leanings are more left, but I don't believe in beating people up for views, or or demonizing people. Even I believe people should be listened to and and taught. You know, we're a product of our conditions. We're a product of where we've lived, what we've experienced, what we've been taught. If some person has been wronged by someone from another culture, they are likely to, you know, go down the racist route without any kind of education, away from that. The classic one I've heard, as I said, because I'm from a working class background, is the influx of Eastern Europeans has driven down the price of, say, plumbing in this country. And so, if you're a plumber and you used to earn a good living and you're now on a quarter of that and can't get the work, maybe you should be listened to.
But then that reminds me of the taxi drivers in London when Uber came along,
Yeah.
and then so the black cabbies protested. They were outraged that this new way of doing things had come and changed what had been working for them for a long time. And it's the same thing we hear about um, Napster upsetting the music industry, and
Yeah.
now Napster is basically is music. It's how we all get our music. It's all streamed.
Yeah.
CDs ruined the record and the cassette industry. This is progress happening, isn't it? And globalization will happen. There are going to be threats to the way we do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at Facebook. Look, we're talking by Zoom now. We're having to adapt. We can't do these conversations face to face anymore. We're
Mm.
having to constantly adapt. And if you refuse to adapt, then you're going to be left behind. And I think it's that same argument, isn't it? You hear it in America with the coal workers and the people who are being put out of jobs because
Yes.
of climate change.
Yeah.
And we have to reduce emissions, so we need to stop burning fossil fuels, and so that puts thousands, hundreds of thousands of people out of work.
Yeah.
And so you've got a lot of very angry people there, and so they are prime and ready to hear that climate change is a hoax, for example.
Yes.
And and they can have their anger and their misfortune kind of used, weaponized almost.
Definitely.
And I think that's the danger. I think I've gone down a slightly different route here, but I don't know. I mean, we need to be so non-judgmentally self-aware, but also this whole mindfulness thing. It feels like a very luxurious place to be in. Like your relative said, it's all right for us middle-class white guys
Yeah.
living in nice houses. But what
Yeah.
about if you're having your livelihood taken away from you? What about if you can't go to work anymore or pay the bills or that kind of thing? Where how's mindfulness going to help me then? How is
Yeah.
this peaceful, non-judgmental listening gonna help me? Then I'm angry and I've got mouths to feed.
I know, and anger definitely is weaponized because, there's money in it, isn't there? It's a sad fact. It sells papers.
Mm.
You've only got to look at certain papers and the way they write and bend the truth. If you're reading that every day, you are taking in some serious toxins. How are you going to operate with a healthy mind with that pumped into you as news, as fact? But we're waking up.
Yeah,
I'm really positive. Yes, it's a slow burner, and yes, it's the right way. Let's not, scream in each other's faces, because that is a surefire way of nobody listening. That just inflames the other side. Let's sit down and listen to one another, and let's put our views across. And if you do that in a non-violent way, and they feel completely heard, they are going to come back at you for information. They're going to be interested in what you say. You can leave a pause as long as you like, and the longer the better. They'll eventually say, what are your thoughts? But they're never going to say it while you're screaming in their face that they
yeah,
are wrong, they are
yeah.
bad. This doesn't work.
And yeah, and we saw this, I think, in the British general election. I think there was Labour supposedly for the working class people, but constantly telling the working class people that they're wrong and they're stupid and they're like, that they're voting for the wrong people and they haven't got a clue how society works. And
Yeah,
then acting surprised when everyone votes for the Conservative Party.
yeah,
And then we're kind of scratching our heads saying, well, why are people voting for parties who are against their best interests? This kind of thing. And it's because people feel insulted and not heard.
exactly, exactly. They did it for spite, I
Yeah.
would imagine, and out of desperation, I think. Their world was falling apart. If you go into poorer areas, they're crumbling and they're forgotten about, and roads are a mess. I saw something the other day, and I can't remember what area, but there's like weeks of rubbish just not being collected in this no-go zone, and there's like rats chasing children, and it's like, if that's your reality,
Yeah.
you're going to want change. You're going to be angry, and you're going to look around you. Now, here's the thing: these are also the places where people put immigrants. So you're going to look across the road and you're going to go, this is why.
Mm.
And you're going to have a paper telling you this is why. So you're going to believe this is why. And this is how it's so easily fueled. And I think that's what my cousin was getting at, telling me that you don't understand, you've escaped it all. You live in a nice house, you've got a great job, you've settled. It's all right for you to be voting for what serves you. What about me?
Yeah. That's interesting. It kind of in northern Natal in South Africa, there's a traditional greeting. So I think this is quite a well-known kind of thing. But when you see someone, you say, "I see you."
Yeah,
It's like saying hello, but it's not just about saying hello. It's like I'm recognizing you as being there. There you are. I see you. And then the other person replies with the response basically translates to um, I am here, or I am real. And so
wow.
by you seeing me, it makes me real. And it's just this kind of acknowledgement that I am made real by your kind of attention to me. And it goes back to this whole idea about, you were saying about listening to people.
Yeah,
When you listen to people, it makes people feel seen and feel complete.
yeah,
And so I guess there's this mindful approach that rather than, like you were saying, rather than rallying against people, listen to them, because deep down somewhere there is some pain and some hurt that needs to be recognized.
Yes.
But does that mean that we all have a duty to take on all of the problems of the world? Do we need to listen to everybody? Do we need to go out there and somehow take responsibility for everyone's pain?
That's a good question. If only I was able to answer that.
I mean, is it, I mean, we're on a quest for happiness here. Yet I mean, should we be taking on the pain of the world? How do we balance that out?
I saw something, again, a meme. I like the odd meme, they're great. And it said something about, we have a duty to leave the next generation in a better place than we stepped into. Something along those lines, I'm paraphrasing. So we do have a duty to not to take that pain on in one respect, but not to let it soak into our bones, if that makes sense. To take it on, to listen, and to help forge your way out of it.
Yeah.
That's the compassionate approach. Yeah, that's all I can really say about that. I think we do have we have a duty, and it starts with listening.
And is it just the act of listening? I mean, is it by saying, I'm here to listen, and by holding ourselves to that standard, and by just saying, yes, I'm going to listen to you, and having that high standard, it takes away the excuse that other people have to not listen, if you know what I mean? Because if you go around and everyone has low standards, then you've got an easy excuse to have low standards too. If everyone is behaving badly, if everyone is still kind of carrying on with the kind of racism that used to be quite common in the 1970s and acceptable, you know, in like the decades gone by, if everyone was still going on like that, then we'd have an excuse to have low standards too.
Yeah.
But by choosing to have high standards, we're kind of calling on other people to step up as well a little bit and say, look, I am choosing to do the hard work now, to be forgiving and to be a listener. And you should join me, because it feels good. I feel good about myself doing this. And you could feel good about yourself too if you were to listen. And if we all one by one start to feel better about ourselves and become more open and accepting, then the world. And I guess this goes about what you were saying earlier about this whole self-care thing. You know, it's like, let's do what feels good and have high standards, but let's not, you know, give our egos too much of a boost at the same time. It's that kind of difficult line to take.
I mean, when I think of any transformation that's ever happened to me, it's come from either listening to very wise people who I've considered my teachers along the way, or it's come from inside via meditation. So I think the best thing we can ever do is point people inside.
Yeah.
And again, it's why are they being this way? They're hurting. What's that other meme? Hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
And it's true. If you're hurting, you're not going to give good out into the world. So you need to heal yourself. And you heal yourself first. Until you've healed yourself, everything you do, you're going to be King Midas in reverse. You're going to mess up everything you do because it's coming from an unhealthy place. So sort that place out, get your heart in the right space. And then, because I often look at some of these people raging and going back to protesting and stuff. And this is not going to make me very popular, but I sometimes think I know of at least one person who is filled with hatred, and it's an excuse to hate. It's an excuse to hate someone else, but it's done in such a way that they get to feel good about themselves for the process of hating too.
Well, it's junk food for the soul. I always think that this kind of rage and social media feeds this. You know,
Yeah.
it gives.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you look on Twitter, they have the column on the right hand side. What's trending? It's basically things to be angry about. And if
Yeah.
you want to feel bad about yourself, just
Oh, yeah.
go and click on one of those things.
Or football.
Or football, yeah, same thing. I just like can't. It sends me crazy. Football. I can't stand it. Why is it even there? You know.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, it's junk food. It's a quick hit, isn't it? It's like sugar for the soul, like a Big Mac for your spirit almost.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the hard thing. I feel like we've gone off on a bit of a tangent. We kind of
We were
set
going
off.
to talk about annihilation, weren't
We
we?
were going to talk about annihilation of the soul, and I guess that's what we're talking about that a little bit. So there was that Pema Chodron quote that I sent to you before this, before the conversation, and this is one that I've drawn on quite a lot because it really touches on, it resonates with me anyway. So she says, only to the extent that we expose ourselves over and over to annihilation can that which is indestructible be found in us.
Yeah.
And I've often thought about all this kind of baggage that we accumulate through our life, and then you know we come to our midlife and we have a midlife crisis or whatever, and suddenly we're trying to find ourselves again. We're trying to find that innocent child that we kind of vaguely remember,
Yeah.
you know. And I feel like that is what we normally get to this point from a place of crisis. So you have a nervous breakdown, or you go through a hard time, or your career falls apart, or there's some sort of trauma. You have a difficult relationship, or a bad incident, or something like that, and you have this kind of awakening, almost, you know, into there's more. There needs to be more to life. There must be more to life, and that's when you start this searching. This is when you start to go inside, you know,
Yeah.
and that's when you realize, like, all of these things I've been doing, then they're not me. So, and this is what we're experiencing at the moment, I think, with COVID and with lockdowns. You know, this structure of life, this normality. It's not. This is decided by other people. This is not
Yeah.
my life I'm living. This is the life of all of these hundreds of people who've gone, thousands, millions of people who've gone before me, and we've ended up here in this world, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. You know, um, go to school, go to university, get a job, get married, blah, 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 blah. It's all been decided by other people.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are in lockdown. And at some point, we're going to come out of lockdown and we have to decide, are we going to carry on being what all these other people want us to be, living lives that they've dictated to us? Or do we choose to find out who we are? You know, and that's this crisis that we are kind of facing as a species right now. But it's also
Mm-hmm.
a crisis that lots of other people have gone through individually, I think, in order
Well, the
to,
timing. Yeah. You
you
think
know.
of the timing of the lockdown. You think of the news just before the lockdown, and the state of like the environment,
Mm,
global warming, all of this. It's almost as if Mother Nature has said, you know, has done it because we were desperate and we were just plodding along regardless. We had this sort of, we had the blinkers on and we were just burying deeper and deeper into the mess. We were trying to purchase our way out of it. The
yeah,
economy, things like that. So this is our golden opportunity. This is a goal. I've heard people saying the Great Reset, and
yeah,
there's loads of conspiracy theories about that now. What do they mean? The powers that be that say the Great Reset. And we do need a reset as a species. Whether it's what they have on their mind or not, I don't know. But we're killing ourselves for nothing. We're killing the earth. We're killing ourselves for nothing. It's totally nonsensical.
yeah. I remember being in. I went to Westfield, which is a big shopping center, and it was just before the last lockdown. We got there quite early in the day. We were just bored, and social distancing was in place, and it was the most surreal experience, because they'd imposed a one-way system around this huge shopping mall,
Mm.
and everyone was wearing masks, and they had coffee outlets, but you couldn't drink your coffee in the building, so you had to go out into the car park to drink your coffee. And I just remember turning to my wife and saying, this is nature telling us that what we're trying to do is incompatible with life.
Yeah.
This is not this rampant consumerism
Yeah.
is just not natural. It's just, we've pushed it too far now.
Yeah.
um, but this whole great reset, we've been living up here on the surface, this kind of capitalist materialist existence, and that's only part of what it is to be human and to be a living animal in the world. There's also so much more, and that's something I wanted to touch on, with that whole kind of, we're stripping away everything we are not, all these kind of artificial things. We're
Mm.
annihilating everything that we're choosing not to be,
Yeah.
or we've chosen not to be, to find what is really us. And it brings me back to that Carl Jung quote: beneath the threshold of consciousness, everything was seething with life. And so that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. When we're meditating
Yeah.
and we're getting quiet and we're trying to, you know, see past the noise in our heads and find that kind of, Pema Chodron calls it the indestructible part of us, whatever that
Yeah.
might be, that silence. What are we hoping to find when we get there? If we can kind of connect with
Mm.
that kernel of something that is in here, what are we hoping to find?
I think we know. I think we know that at our very core. You see, we've just been talking about consumerism and the state of the world and everything, and that's the wrong way. We're going the wrong way. We're going out into the world looking for this joy and peace and happiness, which is a total illusion. We know if we look inside, there's a beckoning inside, and the voice is so quiet and tiny. But if we can just shut the rest of it out and go in, that is where the treasure is. The treasure is inside of us. We don't need anything. We need food, we need medicine, we need love, but we don't need all these other things that we're told we do. So if you look at Rumi, and this is very in line with Buddhism, Rumi says, he talks about the temple of fire, and your essence is gold hidden in dust, and to reveal its splendor you need to burn in the fire of love. And that's what we're doing now. We're burning in this fire. We're burning. All that we're not is being burnt up. And that's very Buddhistic. In Buddhism, we're taught not that there's original sin. We're taught instead that at the core, underneath all of that condition, is the ultimate happiness and joy, more than you could ever wish for. It's all there, all of it. And it's in the unexcited state. You see, we've been taught that excitement is happiness. People say, what are you doing at the weekend? People say, where are you going on holiday? And it's all this like excitement. If you look at excitement from a real deep meditative perspective, it's just like an unnecessary nervous energy. It's not the pleasure we think it is, and it fizzles out. It's not sustainable. But the pleasure, not the pleasure, that's the wrong word, the joy and happiness that wells up from within is completely sustainable because it's who we really are.
Do you think when you connect with that, there's a kind of sense of relief and release? It's like, I've been trying so hard to be this person, this angry person, this driven person, this successful person, and now I can just be. I don't need to work hard at it anymore. I can just be who I
Mm,
am, and that's kind of what this is all about. It's about stop pushing, stop trying, stop grasping, and just
yeah,
be.
yeah, yeah. And we haven't been taught how to be. We've been taught to cover it all up. So we have to relearn it. We have to peel off the rubbish that's been layered onto us. We can't just be. If I say to someone, just be, if I go and say it to my daughter now, instant boredom,
Yeah,
because they don't know what they're looking for. They don't know where to go. And people don't. It takes time. It's a process. You get to be as you progress. You can't just be. You can't just clear your mind. You can't come to peace. These things, these fruits are a result of doing the inner work.
yeah. It's
So,
funny. It's like that. This work is. It feels that the reason we haven't done it kind of collectively as a species. I know there are lots of us who are doing it, and individually we are doing it. But as a species, we're really struggling because we're not doing it collectively, or at least openly. Because it's hard. It's harder than eating the junk food for the soul. It's hard. It's harder than being excited and angry. By choosing not to be angry at what we're seeing or what we're hearing, by choosing not to be riled up and shouting and pushing and being aggressive, it's hard work. But then when you get there, it's actually incredibly easy.
yeah,
There's a lightness. I suppose that's why they call it enlightenment, isn't it? It's a lightness about it, that it's just like, and I'm here now, even if it's just for a moment.
yeah.
You know?
A teacher I've been on many retreats with, he says enlightenment is just dropping all the rubbish. It's lightening your load.
Yeah,
Just lightening your load, and you're getting lighter and lighter and lighter. And that's really how it is. Less and less bothers you. You more and more reside in this state of still joy that
yeah.
is your true nature. You
I mean,
don't rely on external things to bring it.
is there are we trying to seek a kind of equilibrium somehow? Is there a kind of, if everyone was to say all of these things that I'm angry about right now, all these people I'm fighting against, and those people that I'm fighting against, if they were to say it as well, I'm just going to stop fighting for a minute. I'm going to stop being angry, and I'm just going to accept the way things are.
Yeah,
And these people want rights. They can have their rights. These
yeah,
people want what they want. I'm not going to fight against them. And if they were to do the same, they were going to, they're going to stop fighting. They're going to stop grasping. Is that what we're trying to get to? Just a kind of sense of equilibrium where everyone is just like, let's just stop for a minute and
yeah,
just be here now. Is that
totally.
what is that what the ultimate goal for humanity is right now?
Well, hatred perpetuates hatred, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
been said by all the greats. You can't drive out hatred with hatred. It takes love.
It feels like we're talking about sort of different things. So we're talking about the state of the world over here. We're talking about um, not being able to force people to change their ways over here. We're talking about doing your own inner work over here. Is it all connected? Is this kind of mindful approach to life and this loving kindness and this letting go of all this kind of anger and hatred, is it a response to all of those things? Is there a connecting thread here to all of this?
Well, I love what Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj says. He was an Advaita Vedanta teacher from last century. He says, "In my world, nothing ever goes wrong." And I love that. That's total acceptance of whatever presents
Yeah.
itself. Now, back onto how do we respond? How do we respond to a violent world? Let's call it that. there's a Buddhist story about a king who whose armies would conquer land after land, and there was no stopping him. He was bloodthirsty, he was claiming all of this land. And then one day, he'd won the war. All around him, there were bodies and carcasses. And this Buddhist monk starts walking serenely over the bodies through the battlefield. And he says, "Bring me that man." And he catches up with him and he says, "Why are you smiling? You're happy walking over dead carcasses. What is wrong with you?" And what eventually happened was he became a disciple. He became a disciple, and he then spread peace and Buddhism, and he spread it all over India and I think into Sri Lanka and everything. So he stopped his evil ways. He didn't stop his evil ways by being screamed at, "You're doing wrong," because I'm sure, the other side was always saying that. I'm sure he'd heard it many times, you must stop this. What stopped him was someone showing him that there's something more powerful than all of this inside of you. He saw it. He saw a living example of it. He saw peace in the midst of absolute carnage. He saw peace and joy amidst all of that. And that is what turned his light on. That's what flicked the switch. Well, I think we have to be that.
Jung always talked about kind of listening to your intuition, listening to that part of you, which I kind of align here with Pema Chodron and that indestructible part of us, that the intuition we have deciphers the information from the world around us, and it is this kind of non-judgmental part of us that is showing us the way. I mean, is the only way to get to that to just that radical acceptance, okay, I'm surrounded here by these carcasses, these dead bodies, and that's just how it is, and I can choose to let this destroy my world, my personal world, or I can just accept it and keep nourishing my personal world, nourishing my peace, and hope that by being that beacon of light, other people will start doing the same thing.
Well, it all comes from facing our own pain and working with that and through that. I'll say a quote now from a Zen teacher, Charlotte Joko Beck, and I love it. She says, "We have to face the pain we have been running from. In fact, we need to learn to rest in it and let its searing power transform us." Now, you could say that's the whole of the Buddhist path. People say Buddhism's so miserable. All it talks about is suffering. But we work with the suffering to bring the light. We're unloading the suffering by working with it. This energy that we call suffering, this dissatisfaction with ourselves, our lives, and things, we feel it.
Yeah.
When we feel it and we connect to it, and it's difficult, we're in a fire when we do it. And the problem with the world is nobody wants to sit in that fire of self-transformation. They're pointing, they're going, "It's you, it's your tribe are what's wrong.
Yeah.
The other side is wrong." If they sit inside this fire of self-transformation, there will be the hatred and delusion in them that's causing it will be burnt up, burnt away. And all that will be left will be the true, real self, which is filled with joy, which needs nothing, which is happy eternally.
So do you think our job then is to be that monk walking across the dead bodies, to work on ourselves, to find that light, to step into, Mooji talks about the fire of self-discovery, to annihilate all of this, face this pain and face the annihilation that Pema Chodron talks about, and face it and to offload it, like you were saying, offload the suffering. I mean, I know some of my biggest breakthroughs have come from, rather than just being angry, by turning into it and just saying, well, why am I angry? Why am I so dissatisfied? Why do I hate myself so much? Why do I hate my life, my circumstances? Why do I feel like a failure? And I've had revelations from those investigations that have actually made me much more comfortable with who I am. I've started to like myself more.
Yeah.
Is that the work? Do we become that monk? And then others will say, well, how come you're so peaceful? Why am I so angry? How can I be peaceful like you? Are we trying to set an example here and shine a light for other people?
Yes. What I would say on that as well, though, I need to be careful here, because I feel like I've bashed the activists.
Yeah.
I don't mean to, because they have a purpose too. I think it's about your own calling, but if their purpose is done in the right spirit, it's good. Now,
Yeah.
there's a story in Christianity, Mary and Martha. I never remember which is which. But basically, let's say it's Mary, and she is serving Jesus. She's, making the food, she's doing the cleaning, all of this. And Martha's just sitting at his feet. And so she has a go at Mary, Martha, whichever one. She has a go at the one who's just contemplative, who's sitting by his feet. And she's like, I'm doing everything here. You're doing nothing. You're just sitting there. And basically, Jesus scolds her and says, what she is doing is greater than what you're doing. She's being peaceful. She's in that divine state. She's serving in a different way. So I do believe that nonviolence is something, it's the way we are in the world. And how can you promote nonviolence with violent acts, with acts of separation into tribes, with hatred in any way, shape, or form towards anyone? How can that energy draw the opposite, even if that's your intention? It can't be done. The law of attraction states it. We're going to pull in. If we're hating other people, it doesn't matter what they do. If we're hating other people, we're contributing to that hatred.
Yeah, we're just going to draw in more hatred. It's like, it's like they say, energy flows where attention goes. It's whatever you focus on you're going to bring more of that into your life. So if you focus on peace, you're going to see more peace around you. It's like I often think, we rally against wealth as opposed to rallying against poverty. Which rather than trying to find someone to blame, they say, eat the rich, but how about we just annihilate poverty instead, rather than annihilating the rich, annihilate poverty.
And also educate. I've got a big thing about this, because you almost can't blame the rich for the way they hoard. It's all I see excessive wealth, your Bezos of the world and stuff. I see that as almost an illness. If you did that in your house, if you collected everything in your house and never threw out or gave anything away, you're a hoarder, and you get treatment for it. How is money any different? How can you just hoard money in a bank? And so we need to stop stupid things like rich lists. Sunday Times rich list. What's that sending out? What message is that sending out? How about the benevolence list, the people who are doing the kindest things that year? Where's that?
And is there a sense that we need to, rather than filling our newspapers and our attention, and we need to take responsibility as individuals for this, but rather than filling our attention with all those things that we despise, fill our attention with all the things we love,
Yes.
and so we're saying, rather than fueling that hatred, fuel that unity and that kind of progress and that kind of joy, and bring people together, and
Yeah.
without necessarily turning your back on the ills of the world, but just saying, we're not going to cure the ills of the world by raging against it. We need to rage against the abundant, or rage for the abundance, and
Yes.
the kind of the healers, because they're, for every person out there, smashing something up or dividing people, there are other people somewhere else who are looking for cures for cancer, looking for ways to fix things, and are they the people we need to be focusing our energy on, saying, we
Yeah.
need more of you?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We need to stop listening to the people who are screaming the loudest, and look into the hearts of people, and
Yeah.
see that you're right, and it doesn't sell papers. That's the problem. People love getting angry. um in Buddhism, it's said that anger it's like an arrow with a honeyed tip and a poison root.
Yeah.
When you get angry at first, it actually feels quite nice. You and you can feel that energy build, and it's
It's
quite a
cathartic,
powerful.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. But after the explosions happened, you're sitting and you're like filled with regret for the things you've said and done. And if you could turn it round. So it's true, it's got a honey tip and a poison root, and that root is unavoidable. So we need to turn away from anger
Yeah.
altogether. I don't believe anger is a solution for anything.
There is a friend of mine, and it is a very hopeful quote. A friend of mine, Caroline Millington, she's been on the podcast before, but she always said, in any crisis, in any time of hardship, look for the helpers. There's
Yeah,
always somebody who's helping, doing good, and that's where you need to put your attention, because they're the people who will make us hopeful and make us
yeah,
feel that all is not lost. It's like right now we've got the nurses and the doctors who are helping to turn the kind of COVID pandemic around, healing the sick and caring for the suffering. They're always people doing good, yet it's so easy to be distracted by those who we perceive to be doing bad anyway.
yeah. Because we can feel better about ourselves. It's kind of like the soap opera scenario, isn't it? You watch a soap opera, and on one little square there's like 3 murders a year, and it's not reality, but at least it's not our reality. So our reality all of a sudden is okay, because
Yeah.
look at their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we've kind of gone past our hour, and yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, I think, here. I think
Mm,
we've we've tried to heal or figure out the problems of the world.
mm,
There's a kind of macro thing going on, and then there's the very micro thing about seeking out that quiet inside and connecting with whatever that is in ourselves. And somehow those two things are connected. We need to try and be like that monk,
I think as well, we need to be careful with these visions of utopia as well. There's always going to be friction in a world with billions of people and billions of different ideas. You know the phrase, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
We must remember that. We must remember that. And we must remember that there's always going to be this friction. In Buddhism, it's called samsara. It's this realm of existence is by its very nature, because we're in bodies,
Yeah.
by its very nature is a realm of friction.
And I guess as well, it's all about turning into that
Yeah.
that pain, isn't it? Like we were saying before, face it, step into the fire and
Yes.
become aware of it, and but try to do it accept in a way of acceptance and non-judgmentally, and just say, "Look, yes, there is injustice here. Yes, there is anger here, but I'm not going to fuel that. I'm not going to make it worse."
Mm. And stop projecting.
Yeah,
Stop
absolutely.
projecting that. do your own work, heal yourself, and look out at the world, and you'll start seeing beautiful things instead, because there's a lot of beautiful stuff in this world.
There really is, and it's so easy to be distracted from that, I think. But
Yeah.
cool. Well, on that note, I will leave it there. But thank you, Chris, for you're a very busy man, so I really appreciate you spending an hour to chat about these things. And yeah, you're reaching out to 100,000 people on a daily basis on Mindfulness in Daily Life, the Facebook group. So there's 100,000 more people that we can kind of, influence, and who can spread their own light in the world.
Yeah, I'm trying to do it on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
People are meditating for the first time ever.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
You can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw recently, here's a hopeful thing to end on maybe, there were something like 1 million school children all got together to meditate for world peace at the same time.
Wow.
So all in the same place, and all at the same time. So that there is a kind of a vibration of healing energy, I think, rippling around the world somehow. So
definitely, this is going to work out fine.
Yeah, everything's going to be all right.
We're going to be somewhat healed.
Yeah, I hope so anyway.
Yeah.
Brilliant. All right, on that note, I will leave it there. Thank you so much for that, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Take care.
And you. So that was quite a challenging conversation there. We covered a lot of topics, and there's a lot to think about. But there's something at the end of that conversation with Chris that made me recall a poem by Derek Mahan. It's called "Everything is Going to Be All Right." And you may have seen Andrew Scott's rendition of this, but I just want to read it out for you again here. And it's quite a lovely poem, but just have to think about these words for a minute. So this is "Everything is Going to Be All Right" by Derek Mahan. How should I not be glad to contemplate the clouds clearing beyond the dormer window, and a high tide reflected on the ceiling? There will be dying, but there's no need to go into that. The poems flow from the hand unbidden, and the hidden source is the watchful heart. The sun rises in spite of everything, and the far cities are beautiful and bright. I lie here in a riot of sunlight, watching the day break and the clouds flying. Everything is going to be all right. And there's this sentence, or this idea that there will always be conflict in the world. There will always be tribes. And we can rage and we can fight, but there will always be other fights to fight. And of course we must, take a stand for what is right and what we believe is good. And sometimes that just means raising our standards. If we can't take to the streets, or if we're not the kind of people who are prepared to go out there and fight those unjust institutions of society, then we have to raise our standards. Because it all brings about change one way or another. Some change may be faster, some change may be slower. But by gradually choosing behaviours, choosing the way we live for the better, then we can bring about change. And there's that line in the poem there. The poems flow from the hand unbidden, and the hidden source is the watchful heart. We need to listen to our hearts. Listen to that watchful heart, that voice inside us that will tell us, that will steer us away from anger, away from this kind of defensiveness of our kind of protecting ourselves from our shame, if you like, and move forwards into a better world, unjudging and for all and fair. All right, so there's a few words. I've got some interesting guests coming up. Next one on the podcast is Andy Wang. We're talking about raising your vibration. And I hope that you've had a chance to really think about some of the topics we've covered here. Some of it's quite contentious, some of it's quite challenging, but take it in a non-judgmental way and just try and see, how do we bring about change? Is our anger being weaponized against us? Are we being part of the outrage economy? And how can we become more non-judgmental and try and really understand where the other sides are coming from, to allow everyone to be seen and to be heard, whether they're right, whether they're wrong, whether there is any sense of right and wrong. All right, so there's today's podcast. The next one should be fun, and then we've got some really interesting guests lined up. Also trying to get on the books Tanya Markle, who is a wonderful writer, and hopefully we'll be speaking to her in a few weeks. All right, have a wonderful day.